Welcome back, friends, citizens of the Do Hard Things Nation. Welcome back to another episode of the Do Hard Things podcast. I'm your host, JT, certified high performance coach, transformational mindset coach. And welcome back to another episode of the podcast where we have a great discussion with engaging guests on a variety of high performance topics. Today, I have the pleasure and honor of having with us in studio Shelly Scarborough. Talk about the topic of civility. As you know, probably today, as you scroll through your social media, you're probably seeing a lot of people not being nearly as civil as they could be and should be. So Shelly and I have a great conversation about this very topic. I'll read her bio here in a moment, but it's a fantastic conversation about how we should be civil to one another. And sometimes talking about doing hard things, sometimes we get triggered by something. We're so very passionate about a variety of topics or politics or religion and things like that. Especially in this day and age where, I mean, you know it, people say one thing to your face, but on social media, it's a completely different story. And I think, what we kind of outline is how can we bring some civil discourse back into our day-to-day conversation? So I'm super excited about this conversation. So before we get into today's episode, just a couple housekeeping notes. If you haven't done so already, smash that subscribe button so you're notified of future episodes. Leave a review on Apple iTunes. They truly matter. And if you've gained any insights or any benefit at all from listening to the show, I ask that you take a few minutes, even if you're using Spotify or another platform, go over to Apple's. They're, I guess, the gold standard when it comes to reviews. And it really does make a significant difference to the algorithm of the show. So please take a moment, go over there, leave a review. I read all of them. They mean a lot. And I truly appreciate it because I know that can be kind of a hassle. But hey, that's just go pay your taxes. Go pay your Do Hard Things Nation taxes. Go over there and hit that 5-star and leave us a good review. And share with 2 of your friends. Just take a screenshot of this podcast, tag me in it, share, with your friends that you listen to this podcast. And what insight, I love, if you've worked with me at all, I'm always asking, what insight did you gain from that conversation or that coaching session? Because I'd like to know, what stood out to you? Because everyone, you can listen to the same thing, but everyone's insight's a little bit different. I absolutely love that. This episode is sponsored by DHT Coaching and Consulting. It's founded by yours truly. You can go to jtiegs.com, www.jaytiegs.com, where we offer one-on-one coaching, group high-performance coaching, leadership workshops. I have the Forge Mastermind group. If you have a speaking engagement and need a guest speaker, I can come in and offer some motivation to your team. Also, if you have an organization that needs some high-performance leadership coaching, come in and deliver a workshop. So that's what I'm working on. We have a variety of coaching events that are coming out. And we also have the Do Hard Things apparel. If you're watching me on YouTube, we got this new Goal Crusher shirt. It's one of my favorites now. It just reminds me that, hey, I'm not here screwing around. I'm here crushing my goals, right? You can't wear this shirt and be laying around watching Netflix or doing a bunch of other crap. You wear this shirt, man, you're going to be getting after it, right? So this is just a reminder to me that I'm crushing my goals. That's one of the psychological things. You got to remind yourself of what you're doing. All right. So let's talk about today's guest. So today we're going to be talking to Shelly Scarborough. She's a serial entrepreneur with a wide variety of interests. Her first job out of college was as a presidential trip coordinator in President Ronald Reagan's White House Office of Presidential Advance. And it was great talking about some of the stories that she has from her working in the president. Man, I'm tongue-tied today. I apologize. It was really interesting hearing the stories that she had about President Reagan and some of the other distinguished people. She even has a story about our current president from a ways back, which I thought was quite interesting. So Shelby had the privilege of being part of the team coordinating appearances for President Reagan, and there's a lot of protocol there. So we talk about being a civility expert. She gains a lot of her experiences from working in the White House. Shelby had the privilege of being part of the team coordinating appearances for President Reagan, including the 1988 Reagan-Gorbachev Summit in Moscow, the Statue of Liberty's Centennial celebration with President Mitterand of France. Apologize if I messed up that name, Mitterand, Mitterrand of France, and a meeting of the NATO Alliance in Brussels. She went on to work in the U.S. Department of State as a protocol officer. Upon President Reagan's death, Shelby served as the deputy lead in Washington, D.C. for the state funeral. In 1990, she founded Practical Protocol, an international special events management organization focused on tailor-made programs for dignitaries. In 1993, as a franchisee for Burger King, Shelby built 10 restaurants in Northern Virginia. She sold them in 2013 with a passion to support the next generation of women entrepreneurs. Shelby co-founded the Encourage Entrepreneurs Angel Investment Group in 2010 and created the award for Courageous Women Entrepreneurs for Rice University's Business Plan competition. Today, Encourage's portfolio includes about a dozen startups. Shelby launched her Joy Journey e-commerce site dedicated to all things joy as a companion to her upcoming book, The Joy Journey. Shelby earned her BA in English from UCLA and is a graduate of Harvard Business School's Owner-President Management Program. She has served on a number of boards to include entrepreneurs organizations, where she served as a global board chairman from 2007-2008, and the Freedoms Foundation at Valley Forge. Shelby's awesome. The conversation we had was fantastic. I hope you enjoy today's episode. So let's get into it. All right, welcome everybody to another episode of the Do Hard Things podcast. I'm your host, Jay Teague, certified high performance coach, transformational mindset coach, and I'm excited to have Shelby Scarbrough with us today. Shelby, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks. How about you?
I'm doing pretty good. I'll be honest, and I'd like to get your take on this one too, because I don't usually tap into the news, but I want to hit that because at the time of this recording, I'm watching the news, and the Ukraine's being invaded by Russia, and I'd like to get your take on that. But before we get into that, could you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. I am a serial entrepreneur, but before I got into my own businesses, I worked in the federal government as a political appointee for President Ronald Reagan, which really informed the next steps of my life. I also worked in my parents' business growing up, which was Burger King franchises. So I worked every position that you could do in a restaurant. And between those two things, it really helped me cement the fact that I think I was meant to be in business for myself. And I utilized the skills that I learned in the White House to start my first business, which was Practical Protocol, doing logistics for dignitaries, high-level dignitaries. My first client was Nelson Mandela. Second was Pope John Paul II. The third was Lech Walesa of Poland, Poland's now back coming into the news because of Ukraine. Yeah. And it's just been a really wonderful journey. I have written, I wrote the book Civility Rules, which I know that we want to talk about. And I've just started a new business with 4 partners, which is a global School of Entrepreneurship and Entrepreneurs MBA, accredited MBA program for entrepreneurs, which is really a unique way to get an MBA these days because it addresses the needs of an entrepreneur.
Yeah, we were just talking about that. I have an MBA, and what's unique about this program is specifically for entrepreneurs. You get immersed into the entrepreneur, and it's a different mindset than your traditional MBA, which is teaching you how to manage corporate businesses in corporate America. So it's awesome that you are putting that program together.
It's been really a journey.
So given the unique situation of breaking, because we're watching, this is the first time since World War II that a large country has invaded another European country. Just initially, without getting, I guess, too political, what are your initial thoughts of this?
Well, it's not very civil.
No, it's not, is it?
Not very nice to come and break down somebody's door, literally and figuratively. Of course, I come at it from a Western and an American perspective. I try to look at all sides of it, but I have a hard time justifying what he's doing. I think that there's just a lot of potential other implications for this for us. And diplomacy is an interesting concept right now, how far does diplomacy go? Which I'm a big fan of diplomacy, which that's my background, State Department protocol and presidential advance at the White House before that. I mean, I'm a big fan of diplomacy, but at some point, one of the key aspects of the Reagan administration was peace through strength. And so one of the reasons that diplomacy tended to work was because there was a big stick behind it. And I do think that helped keep bad actors in line a little bit more.
Yeah, I agree with that. I look at this, and like you said, the this could potentially be like a domino effect, of there's just a lot of things, just the way that the global economy is. We're in the pandemic. There's like logistical shortages, and there's just the stage has been set. And I've mentioned this in conversation with people. It just feels like we're over the last 5 years, like the stage is being set for something. And I was really kind of I don't follow the news a lot, but I've been following the situation because of that. And I was just surprised last night to see that. So, I hope that this doesn't turn into something greater, but I just wanted to get your take, given your experience with
Yeah.
political.
And, I think some of my suggested short-term solutions would be probably perceived as kind of political, but, opening up our reserves and so that we can be energy independent and provide energy to Europe, et cetera. But I think the long view is what we've always been missing, especially in this country forever. It's one of our failings is we have never taken a long view. And so while we're looking to take a long view on climate change right now, we're not really taking a long view on the rest of the world's view of those things and what their ambitions are. And that all has to be balanced out.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot. I don't know. We could have a whole podcast probably on this topic, and I don't want to turn it into that, but I just wanted to get your initial thoughts of that, given that this is kind of like breaking news right now as we're having this podcast today.
It's very concerning.
But yeah, it's very concerning, and I agree with you. It's not very civil, and I believe, as a member of the military, that we need to have a big stick, and I feel that our stick has gotten smaller over the years. So. Well, all right. Well, let's get into civility. This is a topic that I find fascinating, especially given the current culture. And listening to your book and really kind of doing a deep dive on civility, I just thought that you brought up a lot of excellent points. There's a lot of things that I was fascinated with the book. I didn't realize that George Washington, at age 14, my daughters are going to turn 14 next week. I got triplet teenage daughters. They're going to turn 14 next week. I couldn't imagine them sitting down and writing a list of how they're going to be civil to, this listing out a bunch of rules that are going to dictate how they're going to operate in life. And I just find that incredibly impressive that someone had the foresight at that age to do that. So why are you so passionate about civility?
Well, I think it's the first step to peace. I don't. The old joke of being on the Miss America stage and being asked what your wish for the world is, world peace. Well, that's sort of silly, but that's what mine is. And I just look at it as a place of what can I do personally to contribute to that, to be a part of the solution and not part of the problem. And so as we're looking at Ukraine, et cetera, just even being able to have a civil discussion about it when parties might disagree is really important for being able to move the line forward to making joint decisions. So that's what's happening in Europe right now, for example, talking with NATO and all of these parties that need to come together to agree, because everybody has a slightly different motivation. Some people are more dependent on Russia than we are. And so these are the kind of things you have to have a civil conversation around, or that just breaks down. And then what do you do? So you can see right now how important civility is, and you can translate that to diplomacy if you want to, but just even with allies, being able to have a conversation, because we don't always agree on everything. Mm-hmm. and being able to have the empathy and the understanding that that's okay to not agree. It's not okay to demonize somebody if their beliefs are different than yours. And obviously I have my boundaries, right? There are things that are evil, but I think that the swath of what's evil has narrowed over time, and it's gotten very, if you don't agree with me politically, then you're evil. I think that's a little too narrow a definition of what evil is, and we need to broaden our scope a bit.
Yeah, I see that you see it in social media. If you don't believe a certain way, you're instantly like demonized. Mm-hmm. And, that's lack of civility, right? And one of the points that you make is civility doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be completely like agreeable or even necessarily tremendously polite. But it's having discourse without just completely demonizing. I think it's very dangerous to demonize someone based off of their beliefs. Yes. I mean, if you look throughout history, there's a lot of bad things that have happened when you start to erode, you start to demonize people, and then that leads to, tragic things happening.
Absolutely. And we've got, I think the key word there is beliefs, and understanding the difference between facts and truth and facts and belief. The truth and beliefs are maybe separate things. And so we sometimes conflate those in our statements. And if we're more mindful of what we're saying, I think if we go back and listen to what I've already said, I might have said, I believe this about what's happening in Ukraine, or I believe this. That's my viewpoint. That is informed by what I see in the news, what I know of world affairs, my own personal experience, and somebody else may see it a little differently. And there's not a black and white answer to most things. Most of the world is gray, and we have to kind of understand and own that, and be able to have the humility to step back and say, I believe really strongly in this, parentheses, but I could be wrong. And as long as you can have that I could be wrong on your shoulder, that helps us approach somebody who has a differing perspective with a little bit more of an open mind and an open heart.
Yeah. One of my questions, I think you probably already kind of answered it given the Ukraine situation, is why does civility matter, and what is the impact of not having civility? So if we could transition that to just dialogue that you see on a day-to-day basis in social media and the current environment in the United States, why do you think civility matters? And I guess in a country where we have freedom of speech, why do you think that civility, how does that nest with the freedom of speech? Because if you could say anything you want, then what the hell difference does it matter?
So you're right. And so the old adage of just because you can doesn't mean you should. And I also have another adage that's from the Entrepreneurs Organization and YPO and Young Presidents Organization and groups like that use the adage of don't should on me, and I shouldn't should on you. So, but going back to it, if we have personal responsibility to think about what comes out of our mouths and what we write in social media, and if it's bullying, if it's passive aggressive, just becoming more aware of our emotional intelligence is a big step forward. Because if we understand ourselves and how we're contributing to a problem or a solution, then we're less likely to make errors that are damaging to a relationship. And it's really hard. Believe me, it's really hard when you have somebody in your world, and we all do, who isn't exactly seeing eye to eye with you. We have choices, and some of them are to step away from the heat and to say, this isn't pleasant. I'm happy to have a conversation when it's, when it can be civil. But some of it's acknowledging that people are in pain, and that we have a situation here where the neighbor that I don't know on the corner, and the one I don't know is really key here, it's a neighbor 3 doors down on the corner, and the kids in my court, there's like 6 kids in my court, and they're all cute, 12-year-old boys and one 14-year-old girl, and they all play together really well, especially through COVID in this court. And it was a very safe place. And they set up a lemonade stand out at the end of the court to capture people coming by. And I love that. It's, I'm an entrepreneur, so I love the enterprising spirit. And so I went out there, and of course I gave them $10 for a cup of lemonade, and, or whatever it was. And the neighbor came out and started taking pictures of them. Now they had a babysitter with them, somebody who's out there with them, an adult. But the neighbor came out and started taking pictures and kind of crabbing at them and yelling at them and saying she was going to put it on Nextdoor and they shouldn't be doing this and all these things. Now, I didn't hear it or see it, but of course that riled up the parents. And my response to our group discussion on this was, maybe she needs a copy of my book as kind of a joke, but really also the parents that we needed to, like, somebody said, how could somebody be so awful to kids? And I said, an unhappy person. So it is not a really happy, joyful person is probably not going to come out and do that to a bunch of kids. She might have an issue with it, and maybe she wants to talk about it with somebody, but it would be more civilly approached rather than just coming and crabbing at a bunch of kids, making them feel bad, taking pictures. That's kind of scary for kids, and basically responding in an uncivil way to something that she was not happy about. And then by the same token, I was trying to politely suggest to my neighbors on our little chat that we probably should demonstrate the civility that we're trying to see and not go and yell at her back.
Yeah.
Why are you being so mean to these kids,
Yeah, you bring up an excellent point. People, I look at the people that are probably the rudest or most uncivil that I'm around. They're just genuinely unhappy people, so they
Mhm.
project that out to everyone else. And I guess what's
Not nice, it's not right, it is not fair, but it is what it is. So now you have to psychoanalyze a bit using that emotional intelligence. Now, how do I put myself on the other side of the table and try to look through that person's eyes? I don't ever have to agree with it. But if I want to communicate with that person in a way that helps to change their behavior or helps them see my perspective, it's not to go yelling at them and pounding on their door and saying they're a jerk,
yeah,
even though
and that
that's really tempting.
and that's I think that's what a lot of people do is they want someone to have their opinion, but they're just they're they lack the ability to properly influence someone or make them see, and then they just get frustrated and they just project that out to someone else. And you get two
Yes.
people doing that, you're not changing anyone's minds. In fact, you're just entrenching them.
You're just entrenching it and creating a further divide. I said at the beginning of the story, I don't know her. And that's part of the challenge is it's anonymous, it's faceless, it's easy to get riled up, just like on social media when it's very anonymous and it's very easy to just lash out and say cruel things that really impact people. And I'm concerned about teenage suicides and influence because of social media and degradation to self-esteem, which, you just want to shake people and say, you can't let this affect your self-esteem. It has nothing to do with nothing. It's not real. But to a 14-year-old triplets, it might be.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I mean, their world is so completely different than my upbringing, and I'm really concerned with that.
Mhm.
I know one of my daughters had engaged in social media, and she uh, on she had removed it from her tablet, and because of she was engaged in conversations and she realized how much it was bothering her,
Mhm.
and I was very proud of her. From a parenting perspective, I didn't realize that she was on one of these because I'm like, I don't want them to be on there, but she was, and she told me that she removed it. I'm like, oh, well, that's great. Then we had a conversation about just how
Right.
people are, and it's easier now to hide behind a screen and
Yes.
just be an ass, for lack of a better term, to someone else, and you
Yeah.
see that all the time. And I think we don't know what the long term effects of that is, but you mentioned that the second and third order effects of this is there's going to be some impact.
Yeah, depression, stresses, social anxiety is real. I felt it in junior high and high school, and I always felt a bit like an outsider. I felt, I didn't feel attractive. I mean, all these things that you can say one way or the other, but I was, my self-esteem wasn't super high in those developing years. I was super tall and skinny, and now I wish I were. And but at the time it was awkward because I was 3 feet taller than any boy in my class and half as wide, and I had glasses and all these things, and all those things impact you when you're evolving, you're a young adult. And it was not a fun time for me as I look back on it. If I had social media to deal with where people could poke fun at you, or especially people who are really skilled at finding your weak spots, and there are a lot of those people that could really just push your buttons, that could have been really devastating. And I'm glad I didn't have that extra pressure. So I think it's really important. And I don't have kids, but I just see that how important it is for kids to have watchful parents and engaged parents until kids are old enough to really understand the complexities of social media.
Yeah, I mean, I look at there's a lot of adults that my one of my daughters asked me recently for an iPhone. They've got the Gab phone. With the Gab phone's got a lot of it's for kids. It's a
Mhm.
cheaper phone, almost like a track phone. They can't download.
Oh, that's
They can only
good.
download so many apps, so it's definitely designed for kids to protect kids.
Mhm.
But one of my daughters had asked me for an iPhone. I'm like, absolutely not now. And I hate to be the mean dad because I know that your friends at school have them, but there's adults that can't handle it, let alone a teenage adolescent like trying to
Yeah.
maneuver through that. I just don't think it's healthy.
I have a friend whose son has ADHD, and it's basically an addiction, either the gaming or the phone. Um, and getting him onto the right medications has really saved that. And I'm not pro or con medications. I'm just noting what has happened with him. That is, he's it's given him that ability to focus on homework and the other things that are priority and step away from some of the other stuff. That's just addiction. It's just that dopamine hit. I call it joy juice.
Yeah.
And we don't feel it in the same sense. Like you don't have this euphoria every time that we click something, but that's what's happening is we're getting an injection of dopamine and the joy juice, which I love. And I want to help us get that. I'm writing another book about joy. That's my middle name. So it's called The Joy Journey. And it's all about the neurobiology of how to change your mindset and get over hurdles and use the power of your mind to get yourself into a joyful place and have a joyful civil life, because they all contribute to one another. They feed each other. And so that the joy juice is great when it's found in the right places. Yeah. But it's found through addictive things like social media, gaming, things like that. It can be dangerous. It could be long lasting negative implications.
That's got me on my path to being a coach, mindset coach, and performance coach. Is really trying to understand how do some people find that enduring happiness, because happiness has eluded me much of my life. I found happiness, short burst of it, through dopamine hits, video games, alcohol, all that fickle stuff. It's almost like potato chips, makes you feel good in the moment, but it doesn't last long, and you get that guilty feeling. It's not good happiness. Enduring happiness, like joy, comes from a deeper sense of connection with other people, doing things that make you feel alive, a meaningful pursuit and the accomplishment. And so when I started being more focused on those things, I started having more happiness into my life. And I think a lot of people are searching for joy in all the wrong places.
Yes. I mean, it's so simple because the drugs that are coming over the border, all of the, whether it's alcohol or all sorts of things, are easy ways to have a hit, but really in healthy joy is getting up. And I call these a practice of civility and practicing joy, because I look at happiness as a destination. This is a friend gave this to me, Live Happy, but she did it because because of the joy, and she had seen this and brought it to me, and which is awesome. It's nice to know that other people recognize somebody's passion and efforts and what they stand for. In fact, the name of my house is Joie de Ville. It's joy of the village, and the idea is to find joy in everything and anything, and even in especially in the most negative of situations. So I don't know how the point here would be like with what's going on in the Ukraine. I have a number of people who called me very upset, and it's agitating to them, and they're getting anxious, of what's happening there, because that they just are fast forwarding to World War III. And I'm not trying to dismiss any fears of that, but I'm trying to say, okay, take a deep breath, go outside and look at the beautiful day, take a walk, get some fresh air, change your head mindset, do something that makes you happy. That's just about managing stress, really, but that's going to help people have a more joyful life long term. And to me, civility and joy it's really hard to be joyful in an uncivil environment. And if you're uncivil, you're probably cranky. So it's probably not easy to be joyful if you're uncivil. So either giving or taking, giving or getting incivility is, and somebody's beeping in on me. I hope they just went away, but it looks like a WhatsApp call was coming through. Sorry. So the bottom line is, to me, they're intertwined, and the pursuit of joy along your journey will end up at the end of your life. I believe there will be a great deal of satisfaction with the life that's been lived, but that's not joy as in, Fire Island kind of joy. I guess I don't know why that came to mind, but the kinds of things that are just, like going to one of those places, hedonism kind of joy. Those are just, again, the dopamine hits of satisfaction and reaction and addiction versus, really understanding the wonderful things that are out there in the world and letting that wash over you.
Yeah. No, all excellent point. I need to name my house. I haven't named my house yet, but I need to do that. That's awesome.
A little cottage in Yountville, California, which is in the Napa Valley. And so I just, it's my happy place. My place of joy. So that's, and I try to bring joy to my little town as best I can.
Oh, that's fantastic. I have a friend who's in the wine industry, and he goes out to Napa quite a bit, working with some of the wineries out there. It's a beautiful part of the country.
It really is. It really is.
That's amazing.
Very blessed and just thrilled every time I'm there.
So you worked with President Reagan on his team, the protocol team, and you were on his advanced team, and you remarked about how you admired his ability and saw him defuse situations due to his civility. Can you describe a moment or time, and maybe in detail, about something that you saw him diffuse something and how he handled it?
I think one of the more famous ones that people might remember was when he was shot and he ended up in the OR, and he looked at the doctors and said, "I hope you're all Republicans." And that to me it's wit and humor, and he's teasing. I mean, he doesn't really mean that, and he just wants them to be good doctors. But it's a form of civility in my mind. It's a form of a way to diffuse a very tense situation. I mean, he kept his sense of humor through a very difficult thing, and he was putting his trust in others. And so he was creating a bond with them, whether he knew it or not. He was able to do that kind of thing. Humor is particularly dangerous or tricky. And unless you're skilled at it, there are people who just have that ability. There are other people whose humor is at the expense of others. And I think or sarcastic humor is really hard to do, but true wit is a nice way to break the ice. And usually it's self-effacing, and it shows humility. So that's one way that he did it. He had self-effacing humor. The other would be that this is, I think, is really important. He stuck true to his value system. He didn't change what he believed in. He was just able to open up a dialogue and a conversation, and develop that rapport with somebody like a Gorbachev, and build a relationship to the point that I was honored to work on President Reagan's funeral in Washington, D.C. And one of the guests that came was General Secretary Gorbachev, the former Soviet Union leader of the Soviet Union. And to think that he came, I mean, could you imagine Putin coming to any of our presidents' funerals?
Oh no. And I was a child during that time, but I just remember the tension between the United States and Russia. But I do recall, even at my young age, that I could sense a friendship between the two, or you just sensed it. And I remember that even as a kid. And I found that to be remarkable.
They vehemently disagreed on a lot of things, but just like and the same story with he and Tip O'Neill, they disagreed on a lot of things, and they had out and out arguments, but it was never personal. It was not, "You big fat jerk, why do you believe that? How could you believe that way? I don't get you." I mean, those are all personal statements to people, and I do it, we all do it. And so the idea is that we step back, and I use those people as examples in my book because I have personal experience with almost every example in the book in one way or another. And I believe that they were really good examples that we could follow. And if they could do it, we can do it. Most of these world leaders face very difficult situations in their tenure, and they could be complete jerks if they wanted to be. And I'm not against strength. I'm not against being forceful and direct. But I think you can do it so that it doesn't degrade into a personal situation.
Yeah. No, that was one of the things. I mean, I've been conservative most of my life, and I've had Ronald Reagan. I just remember him as a kid, like I loved his demeanor, and as I have watched movies about him, or as an adult looking back, like he was really a genuine, and I really appreciate his wit. And you could tell he was a humble leader. And as I look through the best leaders that I've worked with in the military, they all had a sense of humility versus like arrogance. The leaders that I didn't have a lot of respect for had a sense of arrogance or a chip on their shoulder about them, but I really appreciated the humble leaders.
Yes.
And don't mistake kindness for weakness.
Correct.
And I think that's, you can easily do that if you're not careful.
Yes.
And I felt he was just very strong.
He was, and he was very kind to the people around him. He used to, if he'd swear, I think he swore, he was a little, he was very much a gentleman, which seems to have gone by the wayside in our culture these days, where women want everything to be exactly equal. And I get it. I totally get it from that perspective. But he was such a gentleman that if he let a swear word like damn cross his lips in front of me or any other woman, he would be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. And I just laughed. I'm like, "Believe me, I've said much worse, Mr. President. So don't worry about that." But he was kind of an old-fashioned guy, and I actually really appreciated that.
Yeah. Do you have any interesting, I don't know, something that the general public wouldn't have known about President Reagan? Maybe something that you saw him do that was kind of funny or interesting, or just a candid moment?
Yeah, from a partisan perspective, sometimes Republicans as a whole get lumped into this category that we don't care about people. We don't care about the individuals. We care about policy and economic policy and things like that. Well, that's with him. I mean, and most of the cases, that's a big generalization. But one example, and I wasn't there for it, but my dear friend Joanne Drake was, I think it was when the Olympic team came one year and brought their medals and had pictures with him on the South Lawn, they were kind of on bleachers, I think. And she tells the story better, but basically he saw out of the corner of his eye, somebody get kind of ruffled and like kind of fall off the step and fall off and kind of, I don't know what the word is, roughed up a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And he walked away thinking that it bothered him. And he walked away thinking that perhaps Secret Service had kind of been too aggressive, or he wasn't sure what happened, but he wanted to make sure that that person didn't leave with a bad experience. So he asked Joanne Drake, who's now the chief administrative officer at the Reagan Library and went back to California. We did the same job in the White House, and she went back to California after he was out of office and has been with him ever since. And she said that he sent her to find that person. So first of all, she had to figure out who it was and sent her to find that person, bring him back. And she brought him into the Oval Office where he apologized. And the gentleman, I can't remember who it is, but the gentleman said, "No, actually what happened, it was actually a misunderstanding. He didn't see what he thought he saw, but he was really grateful that he went that far to apologize and to make sure it was right." And so they have a picture of the athlete putting the gold medal, I think, over President Reagan's neck and taking a picture. And it was a really special moment. But it gets down to, presidents are busy people, and to take the time to do that and to be concerned about one person's welfare is pretty remarkable and admirable. And so he taught me a lot from that perspective that, I went into the events business because I was in protocol, and which was the event side of it, logistics and things. And then with President Reagan, at the White House, it was advanced. So it was all the details, right? I still do my schedules, we call them line by line. I still do things just by the minute. And you have to be prepared and very organized in both of those jobs and have everything just like this, right? But the key is, the reason you have it just like this is because nothing goes just like this. And you have to be prepared then, and everybody's got to be on the same page to then pivot and make something else happen. So if it's a matter of the press plane is delayed leaving, we had something called an interchange. So the press plane would be on the ground. They would take pictures of the president. All the press corps would be on the ground taking pictures of the president getting on the plane at the airport. And then they'd run to their plane. Air Force One would take off, and then the press plane would fly. We would do an interchange, and we would slow down. Air Force One would slow down, and the press plane would fly faster and pass them and land and let the press off to be the same people taking the pictures when he got off the plane. So this is how it worked almost all the time. And if the press got delayed, we had to be able to, everybody had to be on the same page to be able to be in sync to pivot all of the things that would be impacted by that one thing. And so communication, respect for one another, speaking quickly, not having to add a lot of will you pretty pleases in there, but you still are civil and polite and respectful of somebody else. But we also knew we had jobs to do. So it was like, can you do this? This is happening. Confirm this. There's not a lot of, hi, it's me. I just wanted to give you a call, and doing all the flowery stuff around that, because you just didn't have time. So if you're in sync with your teams, if you're in sync with your family members and your friends, and that we forgive a lot of the external stuff if we have respect and rapport with one another. I think I got off track there, but
no, you're good. That was just fascinating. It was interesting. Your experiences are very unique, and I could probably pick your brain all day about just wanting to know your life during that time. You're at a very interesting position during a very remarkable time in our history.
It was, I mean, I just feel so lucky. I was, my dad says that luck is it wasn't his quote, but he's quote somebody, and I don't know where it came from. Luck is the place where preparation and opportunity meet. And so I guess I was sort of ready for it. And I'm grateful for all the upbringing that I had that put me in that position to be ready for the opportunity when it came. But it's kind of hard to tell somebody how to go get a job like that. I mean, I can sort of give them the direction, but it's not something you can just apply for,
Yeah, you have to be like you said, luck and opportunity. You got to be in the right place at the right time, and just happen to work out. It's fascinating. Now, you mentioned that you'd worked with Nelson Mandela a little bit and some other teams. Now, you want to talk about a civil person. As I recall, how I view this is a guy that probably could have came out and I mean, he was in prison for so long. You want to talk about someone that is just so humble, given all the circumstances that he went through.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about Nelson Mandela? Did you have a lot of interaction with him?
Yeah, I mean, I had a fair amount of interaction with him for a 3-day period. And so that's not much in his scope of his life. But, for me, it was a pretty interesting time. It was right after he was out of prison. So he had been, as you said, in prison for, I think, 27 years. There's a song in Invictus. It's called Invictus. It's about the theme of the movie. It's an amazing song about that really represents what he went through and the perseverance that he had to come out of it stronger and more civil, and less defiant, but more committed, I guess, than ever to see through what he had started in a way. And so what had started as activism, and then punished for that, ended up in the presidency. So this was before he was president, and he was he was still with his first wife, Winnie Mandela. So the two of them we were at the Madison Hotel, and I just remember we walked around looking for a headdress that Winnie Mandela had that had been misplaced. And we were walking around through the hotel, the loading dock, looking for it. And they could have just dispatched me, to go get it. But we were hunting it down together. And he couldn't have been kinder. And interestingly, with Winnie Mandela, who was very well known to be very aggressive, I guess, a militant in a lot of ways. The person that I saw and talked to was a grandmother. She talked about grandkids and all the normal things that a grandparent would talk about. And so my experience was a little different probably than global world events experiences. But when we went up on the hill, we went up to Capitol Hill, and there were people who were chanting in the hall, Winnie, Winnie, Winnie. So some group had come in and they wanted to see her. And she walked out into the hallway and did this massive, arm fist, very aggressive stance versus this mild-mannered grandmother who I'd been talking to. So it was kind of an interesting shift to see the personality shifts and stuff like that. But I thought that Nelson Mandela was a great example of civility, and somebody who was obviously civil to me at the time and very kind and cooperative, and whatever we needed, I could get the answer for and all of that, and humble. But at the same time, from a global perspective, he led that way as well. As far as I understand, my understanding of his leadership was that he, forgave his captors. He had cross-cultural, cross-race, cross-party dialogues, and tried to do the best he could to bring South Africa to a place that he thought it should be.
Yeah, what an incredible human being in the life that he led, an example that he led. You want to talk about civility demonstrated? I mean, he would be definitely on my short list of people to aspire to be like. Did you ever see a world leader or someone who was prominent that didn't act with civility and maybe caught you off guard by their actions?
Yeah. Let's see. I hesitate to
This
say
is
the
a tough
name.
question, right?
I hesitate to say the name of the current president of the United States. But that is who was most uncivil to me personally, of all the people that I interacted with, was our current president. So it's
Can you describe the situation or what happened, or?
yeah, it's not earth shattering, but it didn't need to happen, and it left an imprint on me over 20 years ago. And
Mhm.
he was in the Senate at the time, and I think it was he was probably head of the armed foreign affairs, House Foreign Affairs, Senate Foreign Relations. And so I had a client who was the prime minister of Montenegro. I think he's currently the president of Montenegro. Jukanovic was his name, and this was before Montenegro was really was actually acknowledged as a country, as a sovereign country by the United States. So that's what they were here to do, was to try to lobby to be recognized. So he was having a meeting with Senator Biden at the time, and that would be a good thing to do, because that was a key committee. But I needed to go into the room and tell the prime minister something, and that was my job to do. And it wasn't fun to go in and interrupt a meeting, and I was doing it very delicately, as we are trained to do in protocol in advance. But the senator wasn't happy, and kind of raised his voice and asked what the hell I thought I was doing and all of that. And I just had to say, I'm sorry, Senator, I need to pass a message to the prime minister. That's, I mean, what else am I supposed to do? So, but imagine I'm 20 years ago, right?
Yeah.
20 years ago. And I'm just a chick trying to do her job.
Yeah.
And it stung, because it was embarrassing to me that he would call me out when I was just trying to come in and be very discreet. And secondly, I just had no idea why he needed to do that. I mean, he has staff. He knows that, we need to do things sometimes. I mean, his staff certainly helps him now. So I don't understand why that was such a hard thing to be gracious about. And so again, it's not world peace. It doesn't mean he's not a leader. It doesn't mean, whatever, maybe he had a bad day, if I'm trying to put myself in his shoes, but I found it kind of rude.
Yeah, no. And I don't want to make this podcast all political, this interview political, but the previous president that we had, although I
Yeah.
had the same political affiliation and I believed a lot of the policies, one of the things that disappointed me was, some of the lack of civility in regards to the tweets and things like that. And I don't know. I don't know a lot about politics, but I would suspect, like I said, there's a lot of theory and whatnot, but ultimately, I think what led a lot to his losing the election was probably the lack of civility, and it was definitely a disappointment. When you see a leader that's not acting civil and not acting humble and being a jerk, it just doesn't inspire a lot of confidence.
Yeah.
And I'm just not a fan of that.
Well, that goes back to what we were saying earlier. People stop listening. Especially people who disagree with you, right? I mean, I didn't disagree with a lot of his policies, but I did have a problem with his tweeting in particular. I just thought it was not civil, it was not graceful, it was not gracious, but I didn't like that at all. And but I don't agree that Twitter shut him down. I think that they did him a favor in some ways, but he's but I think free speech becomes a big debate in all of this. And I believe in free speech, and it's being civil. That's why I believe in civility, because I think it's easier to have free speech when we have a civil discussions. But again, it takes work and it takes practice, and people who are conditioned to punch back, that's a hard place for them to be. And he didn't do it well. He punched back very well, but he wasn't very civil in his discourse. I never had personal experience with him. A lot of people who have report to me that he's quite kind and quite civil one-on-one, interpersonally. But that goes back to the anonymity of Twitter.
Absolutely. That's this interesting dichotomy. And not to say that TV, but I remember watching some of his shows, the one You're Fired.
The Apprentice.
The Apprentice. And you could just sense when people talked about Trump, and I've read a lot of articles, a lot of people genuinely like the guy. In person, very good. Was he hot-headed? Yes, but generally it seems like people really liked him. But the anonymity of social media brought out the worst, and it's not perceived well. And you
Right.
saw that firsthand. It's almost like, how do some people love this guy so much? And there's aspects of him that I really admire and love, but it's like, why do you have to do this? Why do you have to call other prominent people names
Right.
via the tweet? Like, it just didn't make
Right.
sense.
I agree. It's not presidential. It's not dignified.
Yeah.
And I wish he didn't do it. I think he would have been better served not to. He could have still been direct and stuck to his beliefs and then you could have had a better discussion about the issues and the beliefs. But people are distracted then by because the old adage of people don't remember what you say, they remember how they make you feel.
I was just getting ready to say that because that's exactly what I thought. I can't recall a tweet verbatim except for some of the Hillary stuff, maybe. But I just felt like it was just cringy. And if I think about his legacy, it's probably going to be remembered for the tweets more than anything else. And it's unfortunate.
Yeah. Aggressive and abrasive on Twitter. And I that's unfortunate for him. And it's an interesting classroom to have the debate about First Amendment, freedom of speech and things like that, because there's a lot of other really vile stuff going on the internet that is actually much more damaging than his tweets. And I think that if we're shutting him down, why aren't we not looking at some of the other things? And so it's really, it's a tricky thing. And Facebook is wanting the government to regulate that. And because they want to be off the hook for their responsibility in it as a private company and what they're putting out there in the world, and it's just so complicated. I'm not saying it's an easy thing at all for the companies, but at the same, because there's so much volume of stuff. How do you catch everything, and whose opinion is the one guiding, what algorithm is guiding what is hate speech? And those are all actually fairly subjective. And our swath for that is getting narrower and narrower on usually on one side or the other of the aisle. And these are they're very complicated. But when you have, I'm not really in favor of regulation of speech, because I think it's a slippery slope. And that's why I'm so passionate about trying to find a way to be civil with one another, so that the government doesn't come in and mandate civility.
Yeah, we definitely don't want that. And I remember we talked about, social media. I got banned on Facebook one day. I had a squirrel problem in my attic. Some squirrels were up in there. And if you've ever had squirrels in your attic, it'll drive you nuts because I know that they're chewing. You can hear them chewing. They're in the walls. I set a couple traps, and it took a couple different baits to finally get them. I had a live trap, and it was marshmallows of all things. But it took a while. But ultimately, I was pissed off one day on my Facebook, and I was having kind of like a fun conversation. Like, I'm going to burn my house down if these squirrels don't. I'm going to burn my house down if the squirrels, if I can't resolve this problem. And I got banned as if I was threatening someone. Squirrels. And you apply. It's like I was in Facebook jail for 24 hours, and I tried to apply and appeal. You couldn't talk to a human being, but I felt like my freedom was infringed upon because I couldn't use my voice. Your social media is a megaphone.
Yes.
And I got so reliant on using that. I was like, wow, how dare you take my freedom of speech away from me?
Exactly.
And it was something that was so ridiculous. Like, if a human being looked at that and they know who I am as a person, they'd been like, they would have laughed. It was supposed to be funny.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I can see the argument where Facebook or somebody is saying, or Twitter is saying, look, we're a private company and we're a platform, and we don't have to let anybody on it we don't want to. It's a private company, so it's free. So we don't have to, you're not paying for it. We can ban you. Or even if you are paying for it. I mean, in the restaurants, we reserve the right to refuse service to anyone.
Yeah.
That if you don't wear shoes and you can't come in, whatever, those kind of things. And so, but, again, it gets down to the philosophy of mandates and regulation. And I'm just on the camp of let's just be really thoughtful about the ones we put in and try not to put too many in, because eventually it's the frog in the boiling pot and we're cooked.
Yeah. I know some people said we should probably look at social media almost like and regulate it like a utility, and I don't know. It's a complicated,
Very
yeah, it's just a complicated subject. And I'm not
Yeah.
sure. It'll be interesting to see how it unfolds.
Yes.
But kind of
I'm
going
not-
back to civility, it's a personal responsibility to be civil.
Mhm.
And with the current climate, how do you think that we can get back to being more civil with one another?
So there's some tactical measures. I mean, there's a philosophical perspective, which I hope comes through in the book, which is about attitude and life view and wanting to be a part of a solution, as I've said a couple times. But there's also then tactical ways that we can put this into practice. So I can't control anybody else. So it's always, I get questions about what do I do if somebody's uncivil to me, or if somebody says something that I feel like I have to. There's a lot of social justice commentary out there about I have to correct somebody who's wrong thinking. And it's really tempting from all sides, I'm sure, because I hear things from people that I disagree with that I want to just say, are you kidding me? But that's not, what is that going to do? What is that going to do to further the ability to have a conversation or further the ability to move society forward in a healthful way? It's not. So we just have to, the tactics are things like listen to learn and learn to listen. There's in difficult conversations, there's the practice of listening, not speaking, listening completely, not reacting, rephrasing it back to them. This is what I heard you say. Is that correct? Is that what you're communicating to me? Okay, I hear it this way, and this is how it affects me. And thank you for telling me. And I mean, these are all very contrived conversations, but the more skilled people get at them, again, emotional intelligence work would be amazing. And I know a lot of people who do it, which I can refer people to, in leadership teams, in family dynamics and things like that. And the more we can teach that in school early on, mindfulness and emotional intelligence and communication skills, the better I think we will be. And some of the teachings right now, I'm not sure about. I don't know a ton about them, but I don't think we're teaching good communication skills. Debate clubs would be great to come back with debate clubs. And I've thought about, maybe there's a foundation in there that needs to fund debate clubs in junior highs and high schools so that people can have, learn the skills of communicating with one another. And one thing you do in a debate is you have to be able to argue both sides.
Yeah.
And so you prepare your conversations. And so that's just super, it's great skill for lawyers, like litigators who have to be quick on their feet. But it's great skills for people in general, because when you're confronted with an uncivil situation, half the time people say, God, I wish I'd said this. I mean, either we think of some snappy, snarky remark we could have said to shut them up, or we think of, gee, I wish I would have handled it differently because the ire in me just rolled up into my throat and came out as a F you,
Yeah. I think a lot of it goes back to just communication. I was ordering coffee the other day at Starbucks, and the person, now because of the pandemic, we have the screens, everyone's wearing masks, and there's a lot of options at Starbucks. I just like black coffee with cream in it. I don't venti and whatever, all the things. I don't need any of that. But a lot of people mumble, and I have a lot of hearing loss from the military. And then you combine that with the mask, I can't hear people. And I have to ask them numerous times to repeat themselves. And they're already soft-spoken. They're mumbling through a mask, through a plexiglass screen, and asking me all these different questions about venti, latte, and I'm like, I would just like a black coffee with cream.
Yes.
And it's frustrating.
Yes.
And I'm trying to be civil in the moment, but I wear my emotions on my sleeve, and my girlfriend is sensing my frustration. But all that to say that I'm finding that in a lot of places, people are struggling to make eye contact. They're struggling to use their command voice and have a command type presence. Mm-hmm. And it's compounded by the fact that now we have masks and all these changing things. And I definitely think it's something that needs to be a greater emphasis in our schools is improved communication. And so as you were saying that's what popped into my head.
And thinking things like generationally, the mask and the the drive-through window or the countertop with the plastic in front of it now, and making it hard for an average person to hear it. Think of people who are older, who get confused easily. They can't, because they hear people. I speak quickly, and my mother and I talk about this a lot. I have to speak more slowly and distinctly when I'm around her, because she's hard of hearing. But if I get louder, it doesn't necessarily help. Louder and faster is not necessarily the answer. So slowing it down, making sure somebody understands you, as you say, eye contact, asking, if to reverse it, instead of saying, okay, somebody's putting it on me. Well, to be able to say, to stop somebody who's really in your face about stuff, I think you can say, you can even just physically step back and say, let's start over. I'm sorry, let's start over, and take some of the blame for any kind of confrontation, and say, I'm not trying to pick a fight, or maybe I am, and I'm sorry, I need to rephrase this, or can you rephrase what you're saying so that I can have a better appreciation of it? Because right now I'm not hearing you, I'm hearing anger. I'm distracted by your demeanor, and that's not going to help us solve the challenge.
Yeah. It's definitely a big challenge to overcome, and it really boils down to communication and empathy. And it's just like, as time has gone on generationally, it's like, how do we get back to that? I really have tried to, teach my children to be polite and to make eye contact, but they struggle with that. They're very introverted, and it's a constant, like, I'm just constantly focused on it. And I'm a parent that cares. There's a lot of parents out there that don't care. So it only exacerbates the problem.
And so it's not taught in schools, and polite, considerate behavior is not taught in the home either. And in fact, with women, and I understand this, I get it, the world's a complicated place, that we're being taught, young girls are being taught about being aggressive and assertive. And I would like to say assertive is where my vote falls down, but also self-protection. So we don't have to be nice to people who are scary. And so kids are being taught to, and I understand this, I get it, to be more confrontational, or proactively defensive when somebody is in their space that shouldn't be there. A creepy guy or a creepy person who's trying to get them in the car, or, hi, little girl, you want some candy? All those kind of things. I mean, we do need to be taught boundaries, and to be that, our space is our space, and nobody has a right to get into that. But I think there's a balance there of being able to say, I'm not going to be talking to you anymore. Thank you so much. Bye-bye, and get out of there. Before it gets escalated.
Yeah. And that's one of the bullet points that I took from your book, is that civility doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be nice or polite. Could you expand a little bit more on what you mean by that?
Yeah, it's not about, civility alone is not about being polite all the time. It's about trying to understand the other person and work together. So I guess I like the politeness aspect of it, because I think it gets you further, but, and it feels better, and you walk away feeling less yucky after having a conversation with somebody, if there's some aspect of letting the other person keep their dignity, and keeping your own dignity, but not being indignant. So it's not about, I agree with politeness to unless you're in danger. But in just an average conversation, again, it's not about weakness, but it's about getting in the other person's head. So you're not going to get past the barriers that we put up if you're abusive. So polite is a tactic. It's a way of doing something. But the point of civility is not being polite. The point of civility is connection and intercommunication within a society, and getting something done together, and having society work, period.
Yeah. No, I love that, because kind of goes back to, it doesn't mean that you have to cower. It doesn't mean that you have to, if you disagree, capitulate on your beliefs, to appease someone else. Stand your ground. Just don't be an ass.
Yeah, you can say, look, I'm not sure I agree with that. I hear what you're saying, but my perspective and my experience brings me to a different conclusion, and I'm happy to discuss it, and you hope that you get the same respect back. And if you don't, I think you can say, I don't feel as if you're honoring my viewpoint. I honored yours, and maybe we ought to take this conversation in a different direction. But it's okay to not agree with me. I just don't want to be put down for it. You don't have to put me down for it.
Yeah. Quickly see on the internet, oh, you suck. No, you suck. And it just kind of,
Exactly.
How you said that very eloquently was very nice, but you don't see that very often anymore. It gets out of control
it's
pretty
really,
quick.
there are times I'm listening to the radio or listening, and I'm by myself, and I'm like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? That's just so. And that's my immediate, that's a human reaction, but we need to dial it up a little bit with our, the part of our brain that's a little bit more than our lizard brain. And we have the advantage of having these higher executive functions that a lot of animals don't have. But they seem to get along, they manage in their societies. And we think we're so sophisticated in civilized society when really more primitive cultures, there are very few that exist today, but more primitive cultures sometimes have more civility because they have to work together to survive. I think that's part of our thing is we are kind of islands these days, and we don't really need anybody else to survive. And, even women don't need men to have babies now. I mean, we need what you have, but we don't need, and pretty soon cloning will be perfected and they won't need any of us. So we need to find our humanity in this to stay anchored in our greater purpose and in our greater responsibility to one another and everything else on this planet. And if you have a higher belief, if you have a belief in a higher power, there's really good reason to want to do our best while we're here on Earth too.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Well, we're at about an hour, and I want to transition real quick to your grandfather and his book, and then ask a couple high performance questions, and then we'll call it a day. So, what are you working on? Could you tell us about the book from your grandfather?
Yesterday, I think, was 22/22. That's the day it actually went live on Amazon. Was the book that my siblings and my cousins and I have put together for my grandfather, about my grandfather. So we took his diary and we gave it to a novel writer, a man named Bill Simpson, who's a novel writer. And he took his diary and made it read like a novel, but it's really his biography. So it's all true, but it's quick reading and adventurous reading. My grandfather was the first to attempt to fly solo around the world. And his name is Jimmy Mattern. The book is called Undaunted. There's a few Undaunteds out there, but his is about aviation, has a big picture of him on the front, Jimmy Mattern. And he has an amazing story that is about, his whole life was about perseverance and not quitting and, against all odds kind of thing, having a big dream, getting other people rallied around that dream. And he was a tremendous marketeer. This is in 1933. He hobnobbed with the Lindberghs and the Amelia Earharts and the Wiley Posts of the world. Wiley Post, his friend, became the one to actually circumnavigate the globe solo. He found out my grandfather had been found alive, and because my grandfather crashed in Siberia and was lost for a number of weeks on the Siberian tundra. So the story is just amazing. And so his story is actually much more exciting than Wiley Post, who, landed, refueled, and made it around the world to be the first one. But they missed, my grandfather missed it by about, 3 or 4 days.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so but they were good friends, and it was all kind of this race. Peter Diamandis, it has a quote in the book, because a blurb in the book that, to attribute to my grandfather, because I saw him giving one of his speeches, and we talked about that my grandfather, he was one of the, not my grandfather specifically, but that era was really informative to him when he started the X Prize, because it was about the early aviation races that people sponsored, and that's how we moved the aviation industry forward. Government had a lot to do with the development of the space programs and things, but early aviation was an all-out, prize-seeking, adventure-seeking crew, and very enterprising and intrepid. So this is where Peter Diamandis was influenced to create this same circumstance for private companies, startups, and people with big ideas to have opportunity to do big things and to compete for it in the truest sense. So this is sort of that's all about my grandfather, and I'm so excited. Our goal is to have it into a long format series or a movie, because it would be an amazing story to watch. And we're just very happy after all this time that we finally got it published.
It sounds incredible, and when you said it's basically a historical account written like a novel. I think about Bill O'Reilly's like On Killing series, and I love how they read like a thriller, because I like history, and so I'm gonna definitely pick it up and read it. It sounds like it's a fantastic, right in line with Do Hard Things. So it sounds like he lived that lifestyle, and
Yes.
that's incredible.
Yes,
That's
and
awesome.
he probably DNA wise, maybe I have a little bit of his thrill-seeking adventure. I'm not quite as, brave.
It's like a family tradition of like being like amongst like world leaders and just all the things that are happening in the world, prominent people. It's awesome.
Yeah, looking beyond our backyard and into the horizon, I definitely have that in common with him, and dreaming big dreams and thinking that we can accomplish big things together. And that's all part of the theme of his life and part of the theme of mine. And it's fun. I honor him in that way. I try to anyway.
Sounds like a fantastic story. So I'm looking forward to reading it. Now, we were talking prior to this that you're an entrepreneur, and you've created a global MBA program for entrepreneurs. I was just remarking that I have an MBA, but my MBA was through Webster University, very much like in alignment with corporate America. Your MBA program for entrepreneurs sounds amazing. So could you tell us a little bit about that program?
Sure. We're in a little bit of a disruptive mode in education right now, in general, industry-wide. And we decided that we had the opportunity, myself and 3 other partners, had the opportunity to do something really unique for entrepreneurs. Because of the use of virtual learning, asynchronous learning, which everybody's done from eternity back, but now a lot of people do it online, which is reading and writing and studying and things, but then coming together once every 2 weeks with a cohort of about 10 people, 10 entrepreneurs. We want practitioners. We want people who are in the game. And most of those people can't take 2 years out and go to business school someplace, or every other weekend, all weekend for 2 years away from family, friends, their business, whatever, is also kind of a strain. And the cost is prohibitive and all sorts of things like that. So we've developed a program to meet an entrepreneur where they are. It was created by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs. We have distinguished guest lecturers almost every session, as well as some learnings in general, and they're thematic and they're pragmatic. So we tick all the boxes for the accreditation of an MBA, but there's always an entrepreneurial twist to it. One of our students in the first cohort that we're doing right now has 2 MBAs already. But if you're into this world of EOS or the Colby scores or anything like that, if you're a visionary thinker, if you're a dreamer, if you're a quick start, all of those kinds of terminology that are common these days in the entrepreneurial world, it's no surprise that everybody in the first cohort is a quick start and a visionary versus an integrator, because they're sort of like, I'm in, let's go. I want to see what it's like. And so we're taking applications for our second cohort. We will graduate our first student in March, because we have a one-on-one program as well, which is for people who absolutely need much more flexibility in their schedule. And we assign them a professor and have them pursue their own their course of curriculum. And there's a project at the end, a capstone project in the 3rd trimester of the program, so that the student can pick their own project, which would be to work on something that's for their business, taking some of the interdisciplinary classes that we've gone through for 2 trimesters, and and then work through it and create a project that's unique to your own business that will benefit your business in the long run, and then present it to your peers. So as well as other learning along the way. So it's a 1-year program, one and done, and yet we are creating a lifetime of connection with those students so that there's resources for them and connectivity for them well beyond their year as an MBA candidate.
It sounds remarkable. I look back and I mean, there's a lot of conversation now whether or not formal education is really required and needed. And I look back at my time, I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if I would go back and do it again, especially with the track that I'm on now. But this sounds so remarkably awesome that I would do this in a heartbeat if I had the time. And I don't know, I may look into it at some point. Timing is not good for me right now, but it sounds awesome.
Really neat.
And if you're business minded and entrepreneurial, this is the way to go for sure. Because my MBA that it's not really serving me that well in what I'm currently doing.
Well, I call the program, I call it as Mastermind to MBA. So if you think of it, kind of flipping the paradigm on it, is think of it as a mastermind with peers that's led a group discussion led by with outside speakers and led by a professor with some preparatory reading and some homework. But what you do when you get together is you talk about the issue. You don't talk about a third party case study. You may have read a case study, but you don't talk about the third party case study and analyze that. You analyze it with regards to your own experiences and how does it impact your business? How would you put this into play or not in your business? Have you done something like this and did it work? And what were the pros and cons? So yesterday we had one of our classes and it was on innovation and creativity. So we had a lot of discussion about, do you have the right people in the right spots to be innovative and have creativity in your business? And innovation is about iteration, and it's not, and pivoting and being ahead of the curve. And if you're not paying attention, then you can fall behind in your competitiveness. So how does all this impact your business, and what's the best way to set up an innovative structure in your business? And making people who are not creative be creative is not the answer. It's about getting a team together who can take creativity and implement and iterate and integrate it.
Yeah.
And so this is all, and so looking at where do you do that? Even if you're a one-man band, there's ways to say, what are my strengths? And now in order to iterate and be creative and not be, sort of a single shot person, how do you get that into your business? How do you bring it into your world so that you can constantly be thinking of the future and improving your products?
Yeah, no, it sounds awesome. And I know being in masterminds, I've learned more from masterminds than I probably have learned from anything in formal education just by communicating with other people. So having that type of concept and that kind of environment, and that formal education type environment, merging those two together, has to be awesome. So,
well, we look at entrepreneurs as a whole human being, and from a 360-degree perspective. So usually, as for my case, growing up in my parents' business, I was there when I was 14 years old when they started it, mopping the floors and sweeping the floors with sawdust as we're building the restaurants and cleaning the tables off and whatever I could do, and growing into it. It was all encompassing. And when my parents were at work, I was at home cooking dinner for my siblings, using Whopper patties because we were in the Burger King business. So we had Whopper patties at home, and I made tacos and lasagna and spaghetti and stuffed bell peppers and just about anything you could do with hamburger. So I became a decent cook. I became very self-reliant and responsible, sometimes to my dismay. There were things that aren't great that, I had to take care of because my parents were out working, trying to provide a better life for us. And it's all interrelated. It's not one person's journey when you're an entrepreneur.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I love it. It sounds a great initiative, and we'll put the links to that program in the show notes. So if anyone wants to connect or explore that,
Sure.
Highly encourage it.
Sure. www.gse.mba, which is an odd, it's kind of a cool domain name with the ending being
gse.mba.com. There you go.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So what 3 books have impacted you the most? I like to finish up the podcast with some high performance questions.
Be raised. What I learned in business school, my kids really taught me. That's a good one. That's very pragmatic. Her name is Beawray. There's one up here. There's a whole series on my mantle, and I can't remember who wrote them, but one's about power, one's about seduction, and one's about influence. And those are really, they're heavy, but they're intriguing books to me about the good use of power and the bad use of power, and influence, what you can do with it. So if you have a heart for doing good, how you can really show up in the world and make a difference, and for those who do evil, what tactics they use, because the same tactics can be used for evil. So that's a really interesting one. That goes along with neuro-linguistic programming, which I find an interesting topic. Same thing, you can use superpowers for good or evil, and I use them for what I believe is good, and I think what I believe is good is probably pretty mainstream. So yeah. Happy homes, happy world, peaceful place, prosperous, but, try to help everybody out, being part of your community, those kinds of things, good schools, safe place for kids and families, all those kinds of fun things. So very few people disagree with me, even if we're on different sides of the aisle. It's about how we achieve those things, not what we're trying to achieve necessarily.
I think ultimately we all want the same thing. It's just we bicker about the path to get there.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a forward-looking person. I think we need to be informed by our past. So George Washington's Rules of Civility would be one that informed me a lot, because it's public domain. You can get it on the internet for free. You can download. You don't have to download a book. You can just download the 110 rules if you want, or you can buy my book and it's in the back of there. But that book is kind of fun because it helped me and informed me on my view of how to approach civility by taking all of those rules, dissecting them, putting them back together again into kind of values, into what do they really represent from a value standpoint. And that's what I address in the book, is respect and trust and dignity and honor and courtesy and personal responsibility.
I love it. It's definitely a topic that we need to be more engaged with and more aware of. You talk about doing hard things, having the temperament and discipline to be kind and courteous when you disagree with someone.
Yeah. There was somebody that sent something that said, being overweight and being unhappy with your weight or something like that is hard. Losing weight is hard. Pick your hard.
Yeah.
So living in a discourteous world is hard. Practicing civility is hard. Pick your hard.
Yeah, and absolutely.
I choose civility.
Absolutely. We need it. Before we wrap up, I always like to hand over the mic to my guest. Just ask me a random question. What question do you have for me?
Well, how did your military service inform your current path?
I mean, a lot of people, they join the military because they're running away from something and towards something. I was kind of a little both. I had a troubled childhood. So I saw the military as a way, broken home, emotionally, physically abusive. Didn't have a father figure. I just saw the military as a way that I could live with, this honorable profession, doing something meaningful around role models. Cause I just saw the discipline of the military. And, I've been fascinated with military history. I believe in the United States, and I'm first generation American. So my father and on my father's side were all Germans, some of them Nazis. And on that side, most of them didn't survive the war. My grandmother, my mother's side, they were all Dutch. And so most of them had survived the war, and a lot of countless stories about World War II. And I just became fascinated with World War II. And I just saw, the United States is a noble country, and just saw that pathway as something complete opposite of my upbringing. And so I joined the military, had some traumas, growing up. And then obviously the military, had some experiences there. So the military was good for me, but it's not an easy lifestyle. And, but I was good at it. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I grew up. And I've been in for 25 years now. Now it's like, okay, it's coming to an end. I got to grow up now. But it was always, I liked the structure of it. And, I joined the military. I never thought I was going to go to college or advance my education. Came from broken, poor home. So I had a lot of confidence issues. But through good leadership and mentorship and just a drive to improve, you can come in the military and make your life better you can come in the military and make your life worse. Like, because we have a uniform code of military justice. So that whole go to war, go to jail. If you're a person that doesn't have a lot of discipline, lawbreaker, and you continue that pattern in the military, it can make your life worse because you get that DD 214 saying that that you're dishonorable discharge. You're not going to get a job anywhere. Right. Or you can use it as an opportunity to level yourself up, and that's what I did. I really doubled down. I got educated, and I went to the board to try to push myself hard because I knew if I did those hard things, it would yield some results for me. And so it was a blessing for me.
Didn't you become an officer after enlisting?
I did. I was enlisted for 13 years. I went up the enlisted ranks pretty quick. And then, then I commissioned. I went to officer candidate school after I got my degree, earned my degree. And I earned my degree the hardest way you possibly could. Yes. I used to joke with the officer because I was an officer candidate training I was in the engineer basic officer leadership course, part of their cadre. So I always joke with the lieutenants there, like it took me 10 years to do what you did in 4, because I would go to school at night and just kind of, work it in between field training exercises and deployment and whatnot. But yeah, I did. And it was, I've learned a lot about myself. And that's where the do hard things, like if I leaned into doing those difficult things, it will yield success and results.
Well, I know it isn't easy, and you did take the hard path, but you persevered. A friend of mine did the same thing, and that's when I learned how rare it is that people who enlist actually then go back to school and become an officer. And you wish it would happen more, but apparently it isn't a common track.
It's not. Of all the commissioning sources, it's the smallest one. And the great thing about being a former enlisted officer is that you're the enlisted personnel. I think they tend to respect you more because you've walked a mile in their shoes.
That's about civility too, right? There's the empathy that you can have when you have a conversation with an enlisted person, and you understand what they've been through.
Yeah. And so there's a commonality there, and I would never ask anyone to do that I haven't done myself or wouldn't do myself. And that lent, on the officer side of my career, it boded very well for me. So it was awesome. I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change a thing.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Our paths bring us to where we are, and we can embrace them or we can reject them. And hopefully we don't reject the wrong things, right? And it sounds like you've embraced the right things that brought you to a great place in life.
I have. It's been a wild ride. It's been great. And I'm excited about this new chapter and new mission that I have. And I just want to thank you for taking the time to be here today and being a part of it. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
So, all right. Well, is there anything else? How can people get in contact with you?
www.gsc.mba or ShelbyScarbrough.com. And I think if you spell it wrong, it'll find me too. So.
And I'll link everything in the show notes as well. I need contact information so people get in contact with you. Go buy the book, go check out Undaunted, check out the MBA program, and then check out the other books that she's written. And you've got, I've seen your TEDx talk. So you're all over the internet out there. You're doing a lot of great things. And lots
of things. Yeah. It's hard to pin me down to say what kind of animal am I, but it's been a fun ride.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
For everyone listening, keep doing hard things. We'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the podcast. If you like this podcast, be sure to subscribe so you're notified of future episodes. I would also love to know, what is your takeaway? What insight did you get from today's episode? You can screenshot this, send it to me on social, post it on social, tag me, and when you share like that, someone else out there may need to hear this message today. Only 10% of people are engaged in personal growth and development, and there could be a nugget here that could put someone on a positive trajectory. So feel free to share that, tag me in it, send me a direct message, send me an email, let me know what your thoughts are, and you can connect with me on all social media. You can send me an email at j@jteagues.com. Take a moment, leave a review on iTunes. No matter if you're listening to Spotify or any other platform, like iTunes, I guess, is the gold standard for reviews, and it really goes a long way for the algorithm for people searching for personal growth and development, and it helps us go a long way. It means a lot to me that you took a couple minutes to do them. I read through all of them, and it just feels good knowing that this show is impactful. So if you gain any value, just ask that you do that. If you want to level up, you want to take the next step in your personal growth and development, you can go to jaytiegs.com, jaytiegs.com. We got a variety of options. We got one-on-one coaching, high performance coaching through the High Performance Institute, certified high performance coach. We've got a few different curriculums that I take people through. I also do group coaching. If you have an organization that needs a speaker, or you want a live workshop, I can come in and deliver some training to you and your organization. We also have the exclusive Forge Mastermind group that is an elite community of like-minded people that are growing together. And we have a weekly call there. And we're going to be rolling out new content for that. And then also we got apparel. So we've got to go to dohardthingsapparel.com. Get you a Do Hard Things shirt. Show the world that you do hard things. We got hoodies over there. We got hats. We got stickers. We got patches. A variety of different things, and we got a variety of different models coming out. So you can show the world that you do hard things, and you can go over there and support us that way. That'd be great. So in the meantime, thank you so much for listening. Keep doing hard things. We'll see you guys in the next episode.